What's going on, guys? I'm going to get straight into this discussion of Carson Wentz and his trade from Philadelphia to Indianapolis. So, Howie Roseman has been highly criticized, and I'm not saying he shouldn't be, right, for his inability to draft as of late, and really his inability to acquire talent from outside of his own building, right? They've had some talent there for several years, and other than those guys, they really haven't been able to have a ton of talent just racking up, right? He hasn't been on fire in terms of hitting his draft picks and his free agents and things like that. However, when you look at what he's done with the financial aspect of this team, he always makes it so they can get out of a situation, right? And it's also not screwing the player over. You know what I mean? It's a very fairly structured deals. For example, the Carson Wentz deal. Right? When you look at it and you think like he just got over $100+ million contract, he's going to have a shitload of dead money on his deal if we get rid of him. Well, that's not the case. Now, had they released him, yeah, it would have been bad. But the fact that they were able to trade him was a huge load off of their shoulders because they only gave Carson Wentz a 16.4 essentially roundabout $16.4 million signing bonus, which means when you give a guy a signing bonus, you can't give that, the other team doesn't take that on because you've already given him that money, right? You know what I'm saying? So that isn't going to go to Indianapolis with him. However, aside from that $16 million that they've already paid him, and they can allow that to count in a prorated amount over each, of the final 4 years of his deal. Other than that, nothing is going with him, or nothing is staying in Philly. Every other dollar is going with him, and the Colts are paying that, or they're releasing him, at some point to stop paying it. But it is no longer the responsibility of the Philadelphia Eagles. What was guaranteed on that contract, I think it was an $8 million roster bonus this year, a $10 million roster bonus next year, and so on and so forth, right? It was a big roster bonuses, okay? Number one. Number two, they guaranteed base salary. So they said, hey, Carson, we don't want to give you a $50 million signing bonus right now, but what we will do is we'll guarantee $50 million, right around about $50 million in base salary each of the next 2 years, or over the 2021 and 2022 seasons, right? So that means Carson was able to get his money guaranteed, but Philly didn't have to, number one, they didn't have to pay up front and hand it to him up front. Number two, they knew that, hey, if we trade him, that goes... And now that is the financial responsibility of the team who trades for him, right? So of all this, dead money, it wasn't. It was just $16 million in signing bonus, and that's really nothing. That's $3 million a year, essentially. That they're dead cap against Carson Wentz. So that's not a bad gig for Philly at all. Okay, it's not something you want to do. You don't want to give a guy a $16 million signing bonus and then tell him to pack his bags. He's going to Indianapolis. You don't want to do that, but if it was a situation where you end up having to do that, you might want Howie Roseman writing those checks, man, because he knows what he's doing in terms of negotiating those contracts. And like I said, it was a fair deal for Wentz, but it was just a really well-structured one for both sides to where, Carson, we're making sure that you get all your money, right, that all the guaranteed money we agreed on, you're getting all of it. But, however, this gives us some flexibility in case we want to draft Jalen Hurts in the second round one year and try to get him to replace you. We can get your money off the books, safe and sound, over to Indianapolis, So, from that standpoint, it's a really fair deal for both sides. And if you're Indianapolis, it's not even a bad deal for you because for them, they're really only obligated to Carson Wentz for a year, really 2 years, I guess you could say, this coming season and next season. So if he is just not the guy they had hoped for after that, they just cut him and they don't have any dead money. None. They could even cut him after this season. They would still be paying him $15 million of his base salary, which guarantees on March 19th, so it's essentially effectively guaranteed. That's one of those words I used for the Le'Veon Bell contract situation, which was it's a rolling guarantee. The Steelers did that to Le'Veon Bell, and he didn't want the rolling guarantee. He wanted his money up front and signing bonus, and therefore that's why he said they only gave me this much guaranteed, which is not true. $10 million guaranteed. You were seeing $20 in the first year, Le'Veon Bell. Anyways, sorry. But the point I'm making is For Indianapolis, it's fair. For Carson Wentz, it's fair. And for Philadelphia, it's fair, right? Philly is not going to be in financial hell here because they traded Carson Wentz. It's actually quite the opposite. And for Indianapolis, they essentially got Carson Wentz on that deal minus the $16. So if Philly paid the $16 million signing bonus, it's like they tag teamed the deal, so neither one of them is on the hook for too much financially and not for too long. Right? Because from Indianapolis' standpoint, they're only getting him right now. They just got him on their team, So it's just 21 and 22, those 2 years, that they're really, kind of obligated to him, right? And if that doesn't work out, guess what they have in 2023? Every single one of their draft picks. So it's not like the draft compensation went too far to where it was crippling to them in that regard. So I think it was a really well-structured deal in terms of what the contract Howie Roseman gave Carson Wentz. I think he was much more aware that this was a possibility when he gave him that contract. And I think that that's also the reason they wanted to keep Nick Foles. If you remember, they exercised the $20 million option to keep Nick Foles on the Philadelphia Eagles roster, and then they re-signed Carson Wentz. So it was very interesting, but I think the reason for that was hey, we know we have an out, even though Carson is still getting his money still guaranteed. So it was a really well-structured deal, and so on and so forth. And then as far as the compensation goes, right? So you've got this year a third-round pick. So this is what Indianapolis paid for Carson Wentz. A third-rounder this year and a second-rounder next year. However, that second rounder, there's two scenarios in which that second rounder could become a first rounder next year. Scenario one would be Carson Wentz plays 75% of the snaps, of the offensive snaps for Indianapolis this season. Scenario two would be Carson plays 70% of the snaps, and the Colts, I believe, make the playoffs. Is the structuring of that part of the conditional pick. So if that happens, look, first and foremost, you want Carson Wentz to make you pay a first-round pick because you want him to be MVP Carson, right? That's what you want. That's what you're hoping for when you make that trade. And if that happens, they'll happily pay that first-round pick because guess what? You most certainly were not getting a MVP caliber quarterback with a pick in the 20s, a first-round pick in the 20s, and in combination with the third-round pick from this year. It may be even a pick in the 30s, right? 32, 31, 30. So you don't know. You're not getting an MVP quarterback, at least not right away. You might get extremely lucky, and even in the most extreme of luck situations, you're still not going to get an MVP for the 2021 season. You're not going to get an MVP candidate at quarterback for that season for that kind of compensation. So it works out really well for them in that regard. If they're wrong and Carson sucks, then they only pay the 2 next year, which a 2 next year is essentially equal to a 3 this year. So from their mindset, they're probably looking at this hey, we're basically paying 2 3s. You know what I mean? Because although that is a second rounder next year, when it's a year away like that, they're valued much less than what they actually, what it actually looks like there. So that's just how the NFL treats that kind of stuff. Even Madden, try and trade a second rounder next year, they're going to be hell no, but then you offer them a third rounder this year, and they'll say yes. You know what I mean? It's because that is kind of in the natural wiring, historically speaking, of front offices in this league, right? So yeah, man, I think from both sides it makes perfect sense, and from the Philadelphia side of it, again, you've got Jalen Hurts, right? So this year they don't need a crazy amount. They don't need that extra first round pick this season because you want to see what you've got in Jalen Hurts for 2021, right? So don't expect Philly to draft a quarterback in the first round, this year. I don't think that's what you should expect. I think what you should expect is they're going to try and build the supporting cast to the best of their ability. Draft a starter, hopefully with that third round pick this year. Draft a good player with your first and second rounder or whatever. And they're going to try and build it up around Jalen Hurts. And hopefully, they're going to hope like hell that their new coach hits it off with Jalen Hurts and that he is the quarterback of the future. Because if you come to the determination after the 2021 season, if you're Philly, that Jalen Hurts is your QB of the future, and then Carson Wentz works out there and you get an additional first next year, well, now you're in position to just continue to improve your team, and you're building a young team as it should happen, right? Around the young quarterback, second-year quarterback, boom, good things happen. Now we're a contender sooner than later, right? We have cap space now because we got Carson basically all the way off the books for free. The other part of that is if Jalen comes out and he sucks, okay, no big deal. hopefully we'll be getting a first rounder from Indianapolis next year. And if it's not a first rounder, it's a second rounder. So that gives us some more firepower to try and trade up and get in a better position to draft whoever it is we need to draft. And guess what? If Jalen sucks that bad, well, they don't have a very good team. They'll likely be right there in the top 5, top 10 anyways, if not the first, overall pick. So it makes a lot of sense in many different ways, and the range of outcomes is really amazing to think about all the range of outcomes. I mean, Jalen could be the guy, Jalen could suck, in which case Philly's a top 5 pick, maybe even the worst team in football. It's really could go many. I could see the Eagles making a wild card playoff spot next year with Jalen Hurts, and I could also see them having the #1 overall pick of the 2022 draft. Like, I could see both of those things happening. And if you're the Indianapolis Colts, I could see them winning 8 games with Carson Wentz and him not being the answer. And I could also see them winning 11 and being basically the exact replica of this year's team, maybe just a little bit better, right? So as far as, do I think this is a better situation for Carson Wentz? I absolutely do. Do I think that Carson Wentz is going to return to MVP form? I'm not sure about that, because I think it's more of a confidence issue, more so than just a, whatever, like the supporting cast issue and things like that. I think it's a confidence issue, and I think that is much more difficult to rectify than just a schematic difference here and there with Frank Wright, as opposed to no more Doug Peterson, now Frank Wright. So I think that if it's not a confidence issue, if Carson's completely confident, then he very well could get back to that, because we saw Phillip Rivers, who I actually thought Phillip had some kind of a confidence issue as well, and it turned out that Phillip just needed that really good offensive line to play behind, and Frank Wright to call the plays for him. So maybe Carson Wentz is that same type of situation. But where the only part that I don't love about this for Indianapolis is, it could be that Carson Wentz is just as good as Phillip Rivers this season as Phillip Rivers was this past season with Indianapolis. If that's the case, are the Colts Super Bowl contenders? I know they're playoff contenders, but are they actually Super Bowl contenders? That much I'm not sure about. I'm not sure. If he's Carson Wentz, MVP Carson Wentz of like the 2017 season or whatever that was, well then yeah, I think they're certainly Super Bowl contenders. But I'm not quite sure they are, in my book, Super Bowl contenders if Wentz is just good like Rivers, because I don't really think they were Super Bowl contenders this past season. I mean, they were definitely a complete team and a dangerous team that could beat anybody on any given week. But I don't think to be a Super Bowl contender, you've got to be able to win 3 games against elite teams back to back to back, divisional, NFC Championship, Super Bowl, maybe even 4 games, and somehow like some cases like the Bucs did, because they were a wild card team. So that's just how I feel about it, but I do like the trade for both sides. I think the risk is certainly worth the reward for Indianapolis, and I think it's also even better for Philly. I almost like Philly's side of this even more, simply because it just makes the most sense, right? Like, we get a year to see if Jalen's the guy. If he's not the guy, we get extra compensation, and it's better compensation the following year to try and get the guy. It also, like I said, it makes a ton of sense for both sides. I like it a lot. I think that this is the kind of even if Indianapolis is wrong and Carson Wentz isn't the guy for them, I don't think it cripples them in terms of their future at all, because like I said, they're committed to Carson for 2 years. After those 2 years, they have all their picks, and they have no dead money on their books. So truly a win-win for both sides, and I'm happy for both sides. I think both fan bases are going to be excited about this, and I wish both of them the best. So anyways, guys, that's what I've got for you in this video. I will talk to you tomorrow. Later.